very warm welcome to a brand new edition of World Panorama with me, Frank Periera, on Rajya Sabha Television. Over the next half an hour, we'll bring you a roundup of all the significant events to have happened around the world this week. But first, a look at the headlines. South China Sea row tops ASEAN Summit agenda. Obama warns Beijing that the Hague Court's ruling is binding on the matter. China asks US to stay out of dispute. UNICEF releases report on world's child refugees. Agency says nearly 50 million children worldwide have been forcibly displaced from their homes. Warns many of the children are at risk of abuse. US presidential campaign's focus shift to national security. Both Democrat Hillary Clinton and Republican Donald Trump claim they are the fittest candidates to take on Islamic State. Catholic Church's highest honor bestowed on one of the most widely admired public figures in recent history. Mother Teresa canonized as a saint by Pope Francis. Crowd of 120,000 people gathers in St. Peter's Square for proclamation. Well, on the third day of the ASEAN Summit, the South China Sea territorial dispute remained one of the top issues in focus. US President Barack Obama warned Beijing that the international ruling on South China Sea was binding. China, in turn, accused the United States of interfering in regional affairs. However, leaders at the summit took a mild view of tensions between the two superpowers. Here are the details.
ASEAN leaders on Thursday played down tensions over the South China Sea in a carefully worded summit statement. However, even before the statement was issued, China voiced its frustration with countries outside the region interfering in tussles over the strategic waterways. China sent a coded warning to the United States to stay out of the dispute.
Countries outside the region, they always interfere when we have already strengthened our cooperation and able to resolve our own problems. They have been interfering over the last few years, but I guess by now the ASEAN countries should know that we are better at resolving our own issues through dialogue.
But US President Barack Obama responded with a warning that Beijing must abide by the International Tribunal ruling that its sweeping claims to the South China Sea had no legal basis.
With respect to maritime issues, we'll continue to work to ensure that disputes are resolved peacefully, including in the South China Sea. The landmark arbitration ruling in July, which is binding, helped clarify maritime rights in the region. I recognize this raises tensions, but I also look forward to discussing how we can constructively move forward together to lower tensions.
Earlier in the day, the Secretary General of ASEAN had said the regional bloc would not take sides as US and China were both important allies.
China and United States are among the most important partners of ASEAN. And ASEAN does not want having to choose between, those important partners of ASEAN.
On Wednesday, a dispute between the Philippines and China had overshadowed the summit in Laos. Philippines released pictures of what it said were Chinese boats near a disputed shoal in the region. The area is just 230 kilometers from the Philippines' main island, where US forces are stationed. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Well, joining me for a chat to talk about the ASEAN Summit held earlier this week is the consulting editor of the Telegraph, Mr. KP Nayar. Mr. Nayar, thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you.
As far as the ASEAN Summit is concerned, what do you think were the key takeaways from the summit?
Well, if you read the Indian media and watch Indian television, there were only two issues in the ASEAN Summit. One was Pakistan's terrorism, the other was South China Sea. But that is far from the truth. You mentioned at the beginning that South China Sea was one of the top issues. Yes, it was one of the top issues. But ASEAN is essentially an economic forum.
Yes.
It is not a security forum. And the United States alone, I mean, everybody is talking of President Obama's statement. United States alone concentrated on strengthening economic ties, The Americans now have something with the ASEAN called US ASEAN Connect. And it has nothing to do with South China Sea, it has nothing to do with security issues. It is totally social development and economic development. And the Americans have initiated 4 pillars for this USA Connect, which is going to be the anchor of America's relations with the ASEAN. One is called Business Connect, another is called Energy Connect, third is called Innovation Connect, and 4 is called Policy Connect. And the I follow US foreign policy very closely because I divide my time between Washington and Delhi. And this initiative by the Americans was the fundamental thing in Vientiane during the summit. And that is going to advance US-ASEAN relations in a huge way. Our readers can look at the website called usasianconnect.gov. And you can see how intense the economic cooperation is. It is very unfortunate that in India we tend to overemphasize this South China Sea issue. It was one of the issues, but it is not a make or break issue within the ASEAN.
You know, one issue that has been talked about in previous ASEAN summits also is the ease of doing business between the stakeholders. We saw that too being addressed this time around, did we?
Actually, I'm taking US as an example because US is the biggest economy and collectively for the United States, ASEAN is the 4th largest trading partner. So this specific thing, what you're talking about, is enshrined in this US ASEAN Connect, for example, and the Americans have taken Singapore as the partner for high-tech e-commerce, ease of business, delivering high technology business solutions, So they're choosing each ASEAN country which has expertise in a specific area. And Singapore is, Singapore eased off its industrial presence. They shifted their industries because of lack of space to Malaysia and Indonesia. And their strength in technology was harnessed, So Singapore is going to be the engine, not just for the United States, but for every country which wants to cooperate with the ASEAN in terms of what you said, ease of doing business, making technology viable from an economic point of view, from a business point of view, and all that.
Indeed. Like how you rightly mentioned that in India, the focus really was on terrorism emanating out of Pakistan and also the South China Sea. But as far as India's role and the Prime Minister's, views at the ASEAN is concerned, would you like to say something about that?
Well, when Narendra Modi became Prime Minister in 2014, he went for the ASEAN Summit in Nayar in Myanmar. And at that time, he was ill-advised by whoever. And he made a statement about South China Sea in the Nayar summit because his advisors thought that everybody is going to raise the issue. As it happened in Nayar, only Philippines raised the issue. Since then, India has stepped back. Of course, we emphasize freedom of navigation and freedom of overflights and all that, because that is important for us, especially in the context of our Act East policy. But we have stepped back, and I must say that the Prime Minister has also shifted his focus on ASEAN towards the economic goals in terms of what India wants to do, which is the correct approach. Of course, we make some lip service to the South China Sea issue, which is fair. But we, in our strategic community and in our media, it is raised. It's raised because, raising tensions, unfortunately for our television, not this channel, of course, increases the TRP ratings. But so I think India is focusing more and more on once again on the economic aspects of ASEAN.
And that's how it should be as far as the ASEAN is concerned. Thank you so much, Mr. Nayar, for joining us on the program and putting things into perspective for us.
Thank you.
Well, Well, moving on now, if you want to know the impact of the conflicts in Syria, Iraq and Yemen, the violence in Nigeria, Democratic Republic of Congo, Central African Republic and South Sudan, look to the next generation. That's the gist of a new report from the United Nations Children's Fund titled Uprooted: The Growing Crisis for Refugee and Migrant Children. The report says there are children who are refugees. The children's body has now urged countries to take urgent steps to ensure the refugee children do not suffer anymore.
Uprooted from their homes by war, by violence, by persecution, almost 50 million children throughout the world are refugees. Each of these children represent millions of others like them who are in danger, trying to lead their lives with just one goal: to stay safe. The United Nations Children's Program, UNICEF, says in a report that while 1/3 of the world's population was made up by children in 2015, they accounted for nearly half of all refugees, with the number having doubled over the last 10 years.
Nearly 50 million children in the world that are either refugees, migrants or internally displaced. And of them, 28 million that have specifically fled violence and conflict. That's a near doubling of child refugees in the last decade.
UNICEF has urged countries to take steps to ensure that the children coming in as refugees do not suffer discrimination, marginalization and further humiliation. UNICEF is expected to take up the issue of migration in 2 late September meetings on the sidelines of this year's UN General Assembly.
Burden sharing of this crisis is not fair. The poorest countries in the world are taking the greatest burden. So we all collectively have to do more, not just to provide protection and help to refugees, but to make sure we shoulder that burden. The difference of approach by different governments shows there is room for manoeuvre. You can provide education to children even on the move in refugee or displaced people's situation. You can protect children even in these very dire situations. There is room for manoeuvre to do that, and there is an obligation to do that.
The UN body says its report is a sad and sobering wake-up call, with the number of child refugees more than doubling in the last decade. That means 1 in every 200 children globally is a refugee. Roughly 17 million of these children are displaced within their own countries, lacking access to humanitarian aid and critical services. Children are also increasingly forced to cross borders on their own. The report states that more than 1 lakh unaccompanied minors applied for asylum in 78 countries last year, triple the number from 2014. Unaccompanied children are among those at the highest risk of exploitation and abuse, including by smugglers and traffickers. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Well, it's time for a short break now, but still to come, Pope Francis proclaimed Mother Teresa a saint on Sunday, bestowing the Catholic Church's highest honor on one of the most widely admired public figures in recent history. That and much more on the other side. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching Rajya Sabha Television. Well, the US presidential campaigners shifted gears this week, turning their focus on national security. Both Democrat Hillary Clinton and Republican Donald Trump claimed that they were the fittest candidates to take on the Islamic State and tackle the question of the refugees fleeing the Middle East.
presidential campaign's focus has shifted to national security. On Tuesday, Democrat Hillary Clinton claimed she was the candidate to take on the Islamic State, while Republican Donald Trump pledged to help female veterans and deal with both Islamic State and the flood of refugees leaving Middle East.
This November, the American people have a big choice to make when it comes to national security. On the one hand, we have Donald Trump, who has called the American military a disaster, who disrespects our military leaders by saying, and I quote, "I know more about ISIS than the generals do."
We are going to solve the ISIS problem, but we have to also get back, and we have to solve it bigly and strongly and swiftly. But we have to get back to rebuilding our country, because our country is going to hell.
Florida and Virginia are considered swing states that could play a pivotal role in the outcome of the November election. Both Clinton and Trump addressed military veteran supporters there.
When it comes to fighting ISIS, he has been all over the map. You would have to literally map it out. He's talked about letting Syria become a free zone for ISIS. Look at the map, Donald. He's talked about sending in American ground troops. Not on my watch. That is not what we are going to do.
They're in the process of doing some unbelievable things, believe me. I mean, they're very belligerent. They have no respect for our country, none whatsoever. And we have a situation that's a potential catastrophe. We have somebody that truly does have nuclear and nuclear capability.
Trump criticized the Obama administration's handling of North Korea and what he called their developing nuclear program.
We have a man who is, I mean, he's took over 25 years old, I guess, or around then, and now it looks like he's getting more and more hostile. And what I would do very simply is say, China, this is your baby, this is your problem, you solve the problem. China can solve that problem.
Trump also compared Hillary Clinton to German Chancellor Angela Merkel and her policy to admit refugees fleeing turmoil in the Middle East.
Look, she's a disaster in so many different ways, folks. Disaster. I don't really even think she believes it herself. You know, she was brought so far left. She was brought so far left by Bernie and the group, and I think we're going to get a lot of the Bernie people because of trade, if you want to know the truth. A lot of the Bernie people are coming with us.
The audience also saw a new television advertisement showing veterans and their families reacting to statements that Trump had made about national security. On Wednesday, Clinton and Trump will take part in a televised forum on national security sponsored by a veterans group. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Well, Mother Teresa, who devoted her life to helping India's poor, was declared a saint in a canonization mass held by Pope Francis in the Vatican. Pope Francis delivered the formula for the canonization of the Albanian-born nun known as the Saint of the Gutters before huge crowds of pilgrims gathered in St. Peter's Square in Vatican City on Sunday morning. Applause broke out before he completed the formula of canonization, in which he declared Blessed Teresa of Calcutta to be a saint.
Lakhs of people from around the world, Catholics including hundreds of blue and white robed nuns from the Missionaries of Charity, congregated at the Vatican on Sunday to attend the canonization of the Church's newest saint, Mother Teresa. Even before Pope Francis completed the formula for the canonization, applause broke out as he declared Blessed Teresa of Calcutta to be a saint. A huge portrait of Mother Teresa, whom the Church credits with having performed 2 miraculous cures of the sick, hung from St. Peter's Basilica during the colourful ceremony.
After due deliberation and having sought the counsel of many of our brother bishops, we declare and define Blessed Teresa of Calcutta to be a saint, and we enroll her among the saints, decreeing that she is to be venerated as such by the whole Church.
While Mother Teresa was being made a saint at the Vatican, people back home in India cheered as they watched the process on TV. In Kolkata, at the Missionaries of Charity, visitors poured in to celebrate and offer flowers at her tomb. A Catholic church near Mumbai dedicated to Mother Teresa was rechristened as Saint Mother Teresa Church, while special prayers and mass processions were organized by churches in Kerala.
It was the most wonderful and blessed experience, I should say. We've come here as a family, especially from Goa, for the canonization of Blessed Mother.
It was incredible. I had the opportunity to know personally Mother Teresa 25 years ago, and so I was waiting for this moment. I was in the Mass of Beatification because I was working in Rome, and so I was waiting for this moment, the canonization.
Born Agnes Gongsa Bojaxio in 1910, Mother Teresa set up her Missionaries of Charity in the slums of Kolkata in 1950 and made it her headquarters for nearly half a century. Earning global recognition for her unending work and compassion for the poor, Mother Teresa was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1979. She breathed her last on 5th of September 1997 and she was beatified in 2003. While most of the Catholic Church's saints are honoured decades after their deaths, Mother Teresa has been granted sainthood just 19 years after her death. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Well, much else has unfolded around the world this week. Here's a roundup of the other international news of the week in Globe Watch.
Denmark will buy data leaked from the law firm at the heart of the Panama Papers scandal. An anonymous offer to sell data involving up to 600 Danish citizens was made to the tax authorities over the summer. However, it's not clear whether Denmark is buying from the original source of the leak, who remains anonymous, or from another party. The Panama Papers leak was the biggest in history. Some of the documents have been published by various media organizations, but many remain unpublished. Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte said he told Barack Obama he never abused him. He, however, maintained a defiant stance on his war on drugs, saying UN Chief Ban Ki-moon was a fool for bringing up human rights. In a speech in Jakarta on Friday, Duterte claimed he never made the statement and blamed the media for twisting his departure speech, which led to the cancellation of his meeting with Obama at the ASEAN Summit in Laos. North Korea on Friday confirmed it has carried out its 5th nuclear test, following which the state-backed broadcaster said the country is now capable of mounting nuclear warheads on ballistic rockets. Further, South Korea claimed it was the biggest and the most powerful of the tests yet, based on the seismic activity recorded near North Korea's known test site. At least 48 people were killed in a series of bomb attacks that hit across mostly government-controlled areas of Syria. The Islamic State militant group claimed responsibility for the blast against a Kurdish security post in Hasakeh and for the other attacks in Tartus city. Tartus has been largely spared the worst violence of Syria's conflict since it began with anti-government protests in March 2011. It has become a refuge for many Syrians fleeing the fighting that has displaced more than half the country's population. An anti-terrorism court in Pakistan on Wednesday issued notices to 7 accused in the 26/11 Mumbai attack case, including the alleged mastermind and Lashkar-e-Taiba commander Zakir Rahman Lakhvi. The court also issued a notice to the Pakistani government on a plea to examine the boat used by the Lashkar-e-Taiba terrorists to reach the Indian coast.
Well, let's now shift focus and bring you up to speed with all the sports news that you might have missed this week in Sports Action. The 15th Summer Paralympics were declared open during a mammoth opening ceremony at the Maracanã Stadium in Rio de Janeiro. The Paralympics brings together some 4,300 athletes from over 170 nations in more than 20 sports. Thousands filed into iconic Maracanã Stadium on Wednesday for the opening ceremony of the Games under the motto, A New World. However, the colour and goodwill on show was somewhat punctured when the Belarus team mounted a protest against the International Paralympic Committee's decision to ban Russia from the Games. Real Madrid and Atletico Madrid have lost appeals against FIFA bans on signing players in the next 2 transfer windows. The clubs contested a decision by World Football's governing body to punish them for breaching rules over the transfer of foreign players under 18. FIFA initially ruled on the case in January, but the appeals meant both clubs could sign players this summer. The Spanish sides will now appeal to the Court of for Sport. The European Professional Football League's organisation is protesting changes to the Champions League. Under new UEFA plans, the top 4 leagues in Europe will each be given 4 automatic group places for Champions League. At the moment, that would see La Liga, the Bundesliga, the Premier League and Serie A send a combined 16 teams to the groups. EPFL, which represents Europe's 24 domestic football leagues, fears national leagues will suffer. It wants the governing body to scrap proposed changes to the competition. American swimmer Ryan Lochte has been banned from the sport for 10 months after falsely claiming he was robbed at gunpoint during the Rio Olympic Games. The 32-year-old said he and 3 teammates were held up at a petrol station during a night out. But police questioned the account after CCTV footage showed the group had vandalized the petrol station. USA Swimming and the US Olympic Committee also banned the 3 other swimmers involved. US firm Liberty Media has confirmed it is buying the racing business Formula One for $4.4 billion. The move ends years of speculation about the ownership of the company. Bernie Eccleston will remain as chief executive, but Chase Carey, vice chairman of 21st Century Fox, will become the new chairman. Owned by the billionaire John Malone, Liberty will initially purchase a minority stake in the world's leading motor racing championship. A full takeover is planned if regulators approve the deal. Finally, after watching more than 2,750 sunrises from above the Earth, 3 crew members of the International Space Station returned to the planet for a sparkling sunrise back on Earth on Wednesday. A record-setting American astronaut and his 2 Russian colleagues felt the sun beat down on them on a cloudless morning after a 6-month trek in orbit. I'm going to leave you with these visuals from Kazakhstan. See you again next time.